We are so excited to be wrapping up this incredible day with you today. We have a really special keynote / fireside chat that we're ending the day with that we were lucky enough to pre-record, so we got to preview a little bit of it, and it's pretty incredible and inspiring and empowering. Madam Gandhi spoke with Barra, who's here with us today to cue up the video as well. And just a huge thank you to Erin, to Sari Cohen and her team at Spin Lab for today as well, for all of our speakers, and to Sweetwater, our sponsor. We just can't thank you enough. And after this session, we're wrapping for the evening, but we will see you all tomorrow for our big artist and teams finale to the summit. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, everybody who tuned in today. I hope that you found the panels educational and that there was something in there that you get to take with you on your journey in the music industry and to the next iteration of a Groundhog Day tomorrow, 2021. I'm so excited to have had this conversation with Madam Gandhi. I met Kieran in 2014 when we were both living in New York City. Before she was as very well known as she is today. And so I've had a unique opportunity of learning and growing alongside her as a professional in the industry. And you'll see that reflected in our conversation that, yeah, I'm really finding out things about her career and who she is as an individual, but in a lot of ways, it's two friends talking together, women sharing with each other. So I hope you enjoy the rest of this this keynote that's about to happen. And I want to say a huge thank you to Sweetwater for their support. A huge thank you to Women in Music for putting this on and doing so many years of incredible work in the industry. Thank you for letting me be a part of this organization. And thank you to everybody at Beats by Girlz. Together, we are making a huge impact in the industry. And thank you to everybody for tuning in. So I'll let Kieran lead the rest of the way here with this conversation. So have a great night, everybody, and enjoy the talk. All right. Hello, everybody. I want to introduce our keynote speaker for our inaugural Women in Music Summit in our 36th year of service to the industry. Welcome, artist and activist Madam Gandhi. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Erin. I love you. It's so good to connect with you from afar. I'm visiting you from Big Bear, 90 minutes outside of where I live in downtown LA, and I'm in this beautiful wintry cabin, snowed in. I'm like still amazed that we can have such different types of climates in California, and I'm just working on music out here and snowboarding, and it's been a pretty amazing time.
That does sound awesome. You're outside of your house occasionally, and that sounds like a privilege right now. So
it's true, but then I'm also like in quarantine in this space, so I'm trying to be as responsible as I can while still living.
Awesome. I love that. It's all about the balance, right? Which is, I'm sure, part of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
So the main theme for our conversation that we're going to be having today is about making the music industry your own, which is something that we had talked about being important to you. So you have a track record of walking to the beat of your own drum. I'd say that literally and figuratively. And I want to kind of dive into these concepts of not playing by the rules that are presented to you and like how that's served you throughout your career. So to start off with, I wanted to talk about this phrase that you often use, which is own your voice. And I want to start off by asking exactly what that means to you.
I think there's a lot of times, especially when I first started making music, where I would try to like emulate the styles of people who I really loved or whatever the mainstream like contemporary sound was. And then as soon as I would listen back to it, I'd be like, I don't even like this. It doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound like me. Anybody who knows me wouldn't necessarily think that's my authentic self. even in creating music that's supposed to be like empowering and feminist, a lot of times in the very, very beginning when I was first writing music, it'd be very kind of almost like aggressive, because that's kind of that bad bitch aesthetic that's like doing really well right now. And so I was leaning into that, and I was listening to all the like Princess Nokia stuff and Young MA, and I was loving it. And of course, you know, I played the drums for MIA for a long time, so that's very much her kind of aesthetic and her persona, her personality, her real personality. But it's not my personality. That's the funny thing. Like, I'm actually I love to be loving. I find my power in being kind and positive and encouraging to people. Like, my feminism has always been rooted in warmth and love energy, and actually almost stepping into our feminine and our maternal to uplift others. And the more I started doing that and writing music that was in more my honest truth of feminism, the better my project started to do, the more it resonated with people, the more people wanted to license it for different commercials. One of the biggest personal wins was an Adidas running commercial that featured women and femmes who I really, you know, who I'm fans of. They're in the commercial, and they chose my song Top Knot Turn Up to be the you know, the score for the ad. So moments like that, when you own your own voice and you bravely are authentically just saying what's real for you, I've noticed that works so much better than when I try to perform what I think is needed. And so that's why I live so fiercely in accordance with that mantra.
Mm. So was there a moment where you like fully came into owning your voice, or like a pivot point in your career where this happened, or was this the kind of something that you learned over time?
I think, you know, you and I met when I was doing my MBA. I was at Harvard Business School, and it was 6 years ago. And my intention at that time was really, I had just worked at a record label for 2 years. I was the first ever data analyst at Interscope Records. And I wanted to use my MBA to come back into the industry working at Spotify or YouTube in some kind of music business capacity. And when I was in the business school classroom, for how confident and empowered I already thought that I was as a person, I remember feeling very quieted by the often kind of loud and often male voices in the room. And I remember the education tended to place a premium on the person who was more aggressive with their ideas, and less so on the person whose ideas were kind of best holistically for the situation or for the business problem. And I suffered from that, because I tend to be a more gentle person. I tend to value people who listen more than they speak. I tend to be that person myself. And it was only after coming out of that education, with, of course, so many beautiful, brilliant things that I did learn, but I also was very critical of that way of behaving, where the loudest voice in the room is rewarded instead of the most thoughtful and critical voice in the room. And so it was when I came out of that situation that I really started digging into this concept of own your voice. Two things on that too is, you know, right after I graduated Harvard, I had run the London Marathon, and I ran it bleeding freely on my period on the first day of my cycle. And I wrote about this experience, and this story went viral. And it went viral because rarely do we talk about menstruation, rarely do we break the stigma. And there was pictures of me running and bleeding, you know, all over the internet. And so it was this viral moment. And I remember feeling so proud of myself for running a marathon while bleeding, regardless of whether the story had gained this notoriety. I genuinely felt proud of myself because I felt an enormous amount of self-love for the female body and for my own body, which oftentimes had been shrouded in fear and shame. And so it's just been this kind of culminating growth of every time I do something that is authentic to myself, it's the thing that gets rewarded, and it's the thing that resonates with others, and it's the thing that allows me to connect with people and feel like I'm living in purpose. So that's why I really strongly subscribe to this mantra, own your voice.
I love that. So, in the act of like owning your own voice and speaking truth to power, I mean, I know it's something that I personally struggle with in certain circumstances. And I think it's something that a lot of people who are watching this conversation right now can relate to, especially in an industry which is so much about like appealing to people. So, what advice would you give to somebody in those moments when they feel challenged or doubtful about what their authentic purpose actually is?
I love that question. I've been in rooms, you know, given how much I really feel strongly about lyrics in music today. I really feel strongly that so often we tolerate normalized misogyny in all types of genres, really. And none of us question it. We dance to it, we turn up to it, we participate in it just by consuming it. And I think we consume it because the beats are good, the melodies are good, we feel cool when we listen to that music. But dancing to stuff that contributes to our own oppression, whether it's using the words bitches and hoes, whether it's putting us in positions of sexual subservience that we wouldn't otherwise tolerate. All these kinds of things reaffirm problematic norms in our society. And when I revisit and I look at my intention and wanting to challenge somebody who's my peer, somebody who, you know, is in the room saying these kind of sexist things, I remember what is my intention. And I'm not trying to put that person down. I'm trying to educate. I'm trying to say, hey, have you considered that in order for you to put yourself up, it comes at the expense of women, it comes at the expense of girls, it comes at the expense of feminine people, it comes at the expense of your own femininity. Why do we participate in that? What is the need for that? Why is it that you have to elevate yourself at the expense of somebody else's freedom and liberation? What is that? And I think we have to be brave enough to remember that if our intention is one of purity, of education, of love, then it's always worth standing up, because in us standing up for ourselves, we're standing up for so many people than we could have ever imagined.
So to sort of reiterate what you just said, it almost seems like the answer to your question was asking more questions, like being critical. Like, have you considered these things? What does this mean to you? Is that
Yes.
Is that the way that you approach like
Yes,
conversations
I love
like
that
that?
you're yes, I love that you're bringing that up. I feel people of anything, including myself, if I'm on the receiving side of an educative point, um, we're all so much more willing to receive criticism and thought if it's done in a safe way. If we are triggered by somebody else's sexism and then we yell at that person, they're going to be way less willing to change than if we calmly say, hey, do you know what it makes me feel like when those lyrics are used? Do you know what it makes me feel like when you talk only to the other men in the room and you don't talk to me? Or I don't know if you realize this, but this is what's happening, and it doesn't make me feel like I'm able to participate and bring my best self to this situation. And I want to bring my best self to the situation. We have to first make sure that we're not triggered. We have to make sure that the wound is soothed before we speak up, because if we speak from a place of trigger or emotion, it makes it harder for that person to receive what it is that we're trying to say. But when we come from that moment of inner peace, of calmness, of clarity, I do think it fosters the right environment, and we end up leading by example of what social change can actually look and feel like when we lead with calm confidence.
So how do you get to that place of calm confidence?
I mean, daily meditation. I have a very strong meditation practice. I really do. 15 minutes in the morning. I don't miss a day. I think a lot of us have to really be self-aware of what our daily thoughts are that we tell ourselves. I'm a strong believer in that the way we treat others is often how we treat ourselves. So I've been around bullies. I've been around people who are rude, and I used to always internalize it. But the more work I do, the more I realize, oh, they're actually saying even worse things to themselves when we're not around. They're even harsher to themselves. They're calling themselves an idiot. They're calling themselves a failure. So of course, that's what they're spewing in other situations. The reverse is also true. I try my best to be loving to myself. Like, Kieran, that was a nice beat. Like, that's cool. You couldn't have made that 2 years ago. I love you. I'm so proud of you. Like, I really, as if I'm the baby in the situation, I say these things to myself. And I don't need to say it publicly. It's just for me. And the more I do that for myself, the more I find myself doing that for everybody around me. Like, wow, you just did an awesome run on that snowboarding mountain. That was amazing. That was so cool. And the person's like, Kieran, you're being so sweet. But that's how we spread the positive vibes. That's how we take responsibility for elevating the space around us. And then that becomes the new norm. Those people step into that because it feels good. So I think rewiring the brain, the thoughts in our own brain is the first step to then saying positive things and then doing positive things.
That's really great, like tangible advice. It's a daily practice of being good to yourself. And I can attest to the fact that you are very complimentary of people, in conversations, and you do make other people feel powerful and good. And I can see that reflected back in the way that you walk through the world.
Thanks for saying that. That means a lot to me.
So, looking back at your career as a whole, I'm really interested in hearing about like these choice points or decisions or actions that you took, which sort of changed the course of what happened to you or dictated what became of your career. Like you mentioned the marathon, and that was a really high profile moment where obviously you're like, this is a choice that I made, and then kind of everything was different after that moment. Um, and I'm sure people want to know more about how you kind of came to that conclusion to do it. But I'm also really interested in like all of those moments that maybe weren't so public that had to do with your artist career? Like, when did you have to make choices that were important, and how did you do it?
I love this question. I think, way back in the beginning when the story went viral and I started getting asked to speak about menstruation, but also about my commitment to feminism and my passion for gender liberation, and also just gender expressions of all kinds. This was like a very important conversation a very important conversation and topic to me. People would ask me like, Kieran, can you also come and play a few songs? Like, you're a musician, right? And at that time I had only been drumming for MIA. I had been drumming for Thievery Corporation. I had been drumming for TV on the radio. But I had not had my own music at that point. And that's really what motivated me to start wanting to step into my own sound. I think the thing that I wanted to mention to you about that though was, I think the bravery. Like, I think we gotta just like be okay with like making terrible stuff before we get to the good stuff. I think I have a lot of friends who, they boast about the enormous amounts of albums and music that they're sitting on, that they're one day gonna release. And I don't know if I agree with or connect with that way of doing things, because at the very least, if I put out a song that's very simple and I know I can do better, at least it's time stamped from 2016. And then the song that I put out in 2019 is 3 years better than the song I put out in 2016. And now the songs that I'm going to put out in 2021 are light years ahead of what I did in 2016. And it allows for the humility and the vulnerability of growth, of true, actual growth, And I'll listen back to the stuff I made in 2016 and I'm enormously critical. I'm like, that note is out of key and you have that music all over Spotify. Like, and that's the truth of it, because in 2016 it sounded right to me. I didn't have the skill set to notice that it was any different, And I think that honesty is key. That vulnerability is key. I don't know if I'm much of a perfectionist. I'm someone who prefers to just keep it moving and keep growing and keep expanding. And I think that ends up resulting in a mentality of abundance. It's this fearlessness of like, yeah, I put this out and I have so much more. The best is always yet to come. There's no such thing as I've peaked. There's no such thing as, I'm like hoarding my music because of some sort of fear that I'm not good enough. Keep it pushing. And different things speak to different people at different times. And then finally, from a sustainability standpoint, in terms of finances too, it's good to have things out. It's good to have things out. Maybe something gets licensed that you wouldn't have expected. Maybe someone connects with a song and that books you a gig. If you have nothing out because you're crippled by the fear of it not being good enough, you stay right where you were. You don't move forward.
So the choice for you was to start releasing music. What about in terms of like your business practices? Because I've seen your career go from, like you were saying, the sort of one side of being a part of other people's work to having something that's completely your own, and like navigating that whole process to being like a relatively high profile artist. Like, what are some of the business choices that you've had to make for yourself as you've navigated that have kind of like steered you?
I love this. The best advice that I have for anybody watching this is really always have done every job of your project yourself at least once. I want you to have like waited in line at the post office to know how long it actually takes to mail out your own merch. Like, I want you to have tried to call a venue to try to book your own gig and realize how many logistics are associated with trying to book your own gig. I want you to try to advance your own show to see how long the paperwork takes to communicate with the sound engineer. I want you to have try to negotiate your own fee for some sort of gig that's important to you, but that you think you need to have been paid more money. Every time you've done every single job of your own career, then when you bring on people, you don't self-sabotage by having such ridiculous expectations that are not realistic and then firing the person or setting them up to fail when they're genuinely trying to help you. So in my experience, having done as many of these types of jobs as possible, then when I'm building my team and I'm expanding, I have a realistic sense of what to expect. I have a healthy degree of communication and guidance and leadership. Both are true. I don't over expect, but I also know what's what. And if the person is under delivering, I've done the job myself and I can say, no, it should have only taken 2 hours, not 8 hours. This kind of thing. This is not a good fit for me. I'm going to find somebody else, and being confident in that because you've done it yourself. So I think even though sometimes having done all these different jobs can distract from making the music, I think to a certain extent, it makes you a more enjoyable artist to work with because you have a sense of maturity of what it really takes to get your project off the ground. And you can work more seamlessly and beautifully and collaboratively with the team as you grow.
That's great advice. I think something that's hard for people to kind of stomach because, you know, you want it to be about your art or you want it to be about your creative output. And there's almost this like expectation that you shouldn't have to do it all. And I guess that there maybe was a time where that was true. But today's industry, it's like all about empowerment as opposed to entitlement. And you
Amen.
kind of nailed that.
Well, I mean, what you're describing is a both and, because what I'm saying is for the early stages of my career, I really did do it all because I also enjoy it. Like, I think it's cool to be aware. You know, something we talked a lot about when I used to be in Boston with you and a couple other folks who were kind of in this like music tech collective of school of thought. We talked a lot about information asymmetry, right? That's something that's like a very Berkeley thing. George Howard talks a lot about that. Like, this idea that the industry depends on artists to not know that much so that we can remain exploited. Like, publishing and all these different things are intentionally designed to be a mess so that the people who know what's up can continue to control the situation. I do fundamentally believe that. And so the more we take time to learn, the more we are empowered in our own careers. But like I said, in the beginning, I used to do a lot by myself. And now, 5 years later, one of my biggest pieces of gratitude from this challenging year that was 2020 is that I really feel so empowered by the team of people I'm surrounded by. I'm so empowered. I'm empowered to just fully work on music. I'm empowered to not be CC'd on majority of emails. I'm empowered to trust. I'm empowered to communicate. I'm empowered to say when something doesn't feel good and to know that I'm met with sensitivity and kindness instead of someone trying to gaslight me and tell me that I'm wrong. And all of these things are leadership skills that I'm glad that it took 5 years instead of trying to like push something through in 1 year and it being uncomfortable.
Did you have to learn a lot of that the hard way?
I've had to let partners go who don't make me feel psychologically safe. Psychological safety is something that we talked a lot about at business school that really resonated with me, which is the notion that within a relationship, honesty is the priority. You know, honesty with care and kindness and mutual respect is the priority. But I've been in a lot of situations where when I say my truth, it's met with aggression, anger, gaslighting, telling me I'm wrong. And here's the interesting thing is that I don't mind being wrong. Like, if someone's like, hey, no, that wasn't it. I'm so sorry that you felt that way, but that wasn't my intention at all. And you made an assumption and your assumption was wrong. And I love you. I would love to be met with that. But a lot of times it was met with like a negative bullying energy, whether it was a creative partnership, whether it was a manager. And so those wounds have given me enormous amounts of strength to know what it is that I do want and what the vibe needs to be if you want to work with me, which is one of kindness and compassion and listening and mutual respect, and the things that I won't tolerate, which is aggression, bullying, gaslighting, bad vibes, laziness, any of that kind of stuff. It won't work. And the more successful we are, the more we have the power to command what it is that we want and what it is that we don't want.
So do you have like some sort of written points of unity or ethos document that you share with people when they come onto your team?
I do in the interviews mention that these things are very important to me. I remember even bringing on a personal assistant a year and a half ago, and it was actually really empowering to put on my social media. I never crowdsource publicly like that, but that was the first time that I chose to. So I put on my story that I was looking for a personal assistant, and it was really empowering for me to just list out exactly what I do want and exactly what I don't want, which is laziness, whining, not being proactive and trying to predict the needs or figure out a problem, complaining, not listening. These kinds of things are just negative energies, and I think because I know how much they affect my heart and they affect my productivity, I have to have an even stricter boundary with it. And for anybody who's watching, honestly, there's always the half of us that has to keep evolving and we can always do better. But there's always the half of us that's just our true self. And we have to honor what is our true self and what allows us to operate at our most optimal and ask for those things.
It's lovely. So before we had this conversation, we talked about this theme of making the music industry your own. And I want to know exactly what that means to you in this moment.
I think it means going where the joy is. I think it means going where what's fun and like being so brave to just be like, no. I feel so empowered that I have my studio set up downstairs and that I'm in the middle of this mountain and that half my day is producing and half my day is snowboarding. And then I sleep early and I wake up early and I do my meditation and I do it all over again, you know, and I feel connected with my team. I feel like I'm meeting my responsibilities. Um, and I feel zen while doing it. And there is a lot of conversation now, especially coming out of this pandemic, that's forced us to all slow down, is the question of whose value system are we all participating in? And does that value system work for us? Because if we participate in it, we only reinforce its legitimacy. But if we shy away from it and don't participate in it, that's radical activism. And I do think the industry has often and many industries, business in general, often rewards masculine styles of behavior, which is like flexing that you haven't slept in 5 days, flexing that you have Red Bull in the studio, flexing that you use certain drugs or party tools to make your music. All these kinds of things, whatever's authentic to you, that's fine. But for me, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to need any kind of drug or drinking or anything to make my music. I want to, the flex for me is that I got 8 hours of sleep and that I drink water and I made a good beat. Like that's the flex, you know? So that's me making the industry my own. And if I'm successful in that, then other people follow suit because it's a new model that is functional and works. So I think these are some of the examples of what I'm thinking of. How do I make this industry my own where I'm participating in it and I'm proud of what I'm doing, but I'm not doing things that I don't agree with in order to have access to this industry.
It's very interesting and timely as well. So, a few more questions. In terms of how you define success for yourself, I'm wondering what that currently is. Like, what does success mean? And then how has that maybe changed from 5 years ago? Which, what kind of success was happening then?
For me, I think about 5 years ago, I think, you know, being the product of two very like successful Indian parents, I think I was still problematically on the hamster wheel of external validation, external accolades, external credibility. And I think that's the enormous amount of personal work that I've done to hop off of that hamster wheel because I understand how damaging and toxic it is and how it actually keeps you trapped, like just kind of addicted to whatever the next almost like dopamine rush of some sort of accolade, you know, is, whether it's getting booked for a certain festival or like being considered for a certain press, partnering with somebody. Like I just had to really work on shifting the reason for myself and being really self-aware of like, Kieran, if that didn't have the name brand, would you show up for that festival? Like, do you actually think that festival is cool? Do you actually want to do that? Like really digging deeper in terms of my intention. And I do feel proud of my own growth in that way because now success looks like personal happiness. Like success looks like pushing myself to finish a beat or finish a piece of music that night instead of saying I'm going to do it tomorrow. You know, that feels like success. Success feels like trying out something and then actually loving how it sounds. Success feels like getting better at stuff calmly and confidently without the need to post it to social media, without the need to tell a million people, almost with the need to make something beautiful that then when you text a friend that beat or that song, it like puts a smile on their face. Do you know what I mean? Like that's more the space that I'm in right now. So that's how I've shifted success for myself.
How long do you think it took you to get off that hamster wheel? And were there like any moments where you just made that conscious decision?
I think it's times when I've looked back on the year and then I'm like, what do I remember from this year? And it's always the moments where I'm present. I mean, everyone watching this, you all know that. Like, it's when we're in flow, it's when we feel like we don't want to be anywhere else rather than where we are. It's being on stage, at least. I miss that the most, you know, or it's being when I'm on Ableton and making something that I'm proud of and I just want to loop it all day long in my studio because I like how it sounds and nobody else is there and it's just me and the thing that I just made, and that's the joy, that's the moment. And the more I would reflect on the things that make me feel happy, the easier it is to optimize for your own joy.
Wow, I love that. So people want to talk to you about all sorts of stuff. Like you're constantly tapped for interviews and speaking engagements, and even just the range of topics that you speak on is it's a huge spectrum. So being a person that's on the other side of this, that is asking you questions, what I'm really interested in hearing about is like what are the questions that people should be asking of you, or what's important to you right now that you wish more people were talking about?
I love this question, and I feel the same about you, Erin. So thanks for saying that. Love you. I really do feel the same way about you. I really love talking about the inner peace. Inner peace, inner happiness, joy, positivity. The thoughts that we have in our brain, rewiring the brain to work for you. That's something that my mom says often. She always says, like, make your thoughts work for you. Don't make them work against you. And I love this concept because I really believe it's true. When I'm making a beat, like I'm working on something right now downstairs, and I can waste time being like, the drums sound like bad, the bass is not the right bass line, or I can be like, I really love the vocal. What's the bass line that's needed to support this awesome vocal? So like it's getting to the same end result, which is that I want to rewrite the bass line, but like doing so with the like rainbows path versus the like negative dark dungeon path, And I think I just want to be asked about, getting our mind right so that our heart is right, so that the work is right, so that we're contributing to a positive world. I really believe that. I really believe it starts with ourselves. So I think that's why I'm putting such a premium on our mental health and our mental wellness.
Well, there couldn't be a time that was more important for people to think about those things, especially in isolation. So besides, I know you had said that you do a daily meditation practice. Like, how do you approach that ethos in your day to day? Like, as you walk through each day, what does that mean, or how do you execute that?
I think it means um, showing love and kindness to people. I get a lot of joy being kind and loving and excited for people. I get a lot of joy listening to people. I get a lot of joy when people miss me. Kieran, I miss you. I miss that conversation we had. Where are you? When are you coming back? That makes me feel valued, included, that I'm contributing something to that person's life such that they wish I was around. That makes me feel good. That makes me emotional just now saying that, because that's so real for me. And I don't think I would have thought that I would have told you 5 years ago that I want someone to miss me. That's like, what, you know what I mean? Like you would think that value is about being on stages and being desired all over the world, but it's almost more those like intimate, deeper human connections that are obviously so much more validating. Another thing that I do, and I really do this, is I just have prioritized the role of nature in my life. I've been renting out a spot in Topanga Canyon, which is this beautiful mountain space just next to Malibu, about half an hour from my house, where I've been working on music there and trail running and surfing. The other day I was surfing, there was rainbows while the waves were crashing, there was baby otters. I was like, how can life be like this? This is heaven. People take mushrooms and psychedelics to experience what nature does already for us. Like I was just feeling this enormous amount of genuine gratitude. And with that, I'll tell people that so that they know the mental space that I'm in. I'll tell my team that, even though it looks like a ridiculously cheesy text, just so they know who they're working with and what matters to me. And so I would say it's those things, being kind to people and being in nature are really energizing my mental health right now.
So amazing. The otters. I was right there with you. I was in that moment.
It was crazy. And the best thing is, like, you have to also be so humble, because like I'm not a good surfer, but I go out there all the time because I like getting my ass kicked. I really love it. Like when I get splashed and I get in a somersault because the wave is heavy and the board hits my head, like this happens. Like it's gnarly, but you're like, holy shit, I'm alive. Like this is awesome. I really feel that way. So I think that yeah, whatever we can do to kind of like stay alive helps the music making process also, and it helps these small day-to-day negative vibes with people like have less importance.
I see a really interesting correlation between the music making process and the one that you just talked about with like surfing and going out and doing it, even though you're not the best surfer. Like I remember 5 years ago when you were just getting started with learning how to use Ableton, or I mean, I was even in this room with you when you sort of like wrote your first song, which
You
is
were, you
crazy.
were Bad Habits. You were in the
I
winter,
know.
December 2016. I remember.
And you've always just had this sort of like relentless drive to do something and to learn and to, evolve and be better at whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish.
That
Do
means a lot.
you
And honestly, Erin, like, can wait before you ask that question. I really want to share something with folks who are like watching this because you're such an educator, and that is your gift. And you are so good at empowering people with knowledge. And when I was growing up, for better or for worse, my parents. They're so brilliant, but in their desire for their kids to do well, there was always that kind of type A, be the best, win, no room for mistakes type mentality. And the problem with that is that in order to learn, there has to be like messiness. There has to be like the safety psychologically to like make something that sounds terrible to then fix it and make it sound more like how you want it to. And the yes and mentality, or like, cool, what do you think about that? How did that feel? And we have to remember that not only for ourselves, but to foster that environment for other people. If we're mentoring someone or we're teaching somebody something and we rush them or we make them feel bad for something, it doesn't create the right environment for them to learn. And so the role of educators like you and the role of folks who really are good at being patient and creating space for that messiness is something that I really didn't have enough of in childhood and that I really place a premium on now in my life.
Mm. Well, you just answered my question because I was gonna,
Perfect.
I was gonna ask about how you sort of came into that, if that was like part of your origin story and this has always been who you are, or so that's per you. I didn't
I
even
think
have to ask it.
Listen, the biggest thing with our own personal pains is to just say, okay, cool, that really hurt. That didn't feel good. Why didn't that feel good? Oh, okay. Because this is deeper. That's not just like, I've been in situations where somebody else pushes me around or rushes me, and I'm like very upset about it. But if you look at what actually happened, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was just somebody being like, hey, like, I'm going to finish this because it's faster for them to finish than for me to try to learn and finish it. But I'm getting triggered by that because of something deeper that's going on for me that, still holds pain. And so for anybody watching this, we have to be so responsible with our own childhood stuff and our own pain and our own times where we've gone through something negative, and say, okay, I'm going to heal that wound so that when I'm in that situation multiple times again, it doesn't keep opening the wound. It's just a new situation, and I can exist in that situation without fear or anxiety. And that work is enormously powerful. We have to just be aware.
So have you, this might seem like a ridiculous question, but like, have you worked through that stuff just on your own, or did you work with like therapists, or you
Yeah.
just seem so like enlightened and involved in some sense? And I'm wondering, like, do you spend parts of each day just like in like contemplative thought, or like how do you come to these conclusions?
I really appreciate that. I have three sources that have really been working for me that honestly I've been able to prioritize in this pandemic because we have time to work on these things and not be in the hamster wheel of the next show and the next this and the next that. And the first thing is, of course, therapy, 100%. Working every single week with someone who's queer identifying, who's married to a wife and has a baby and is living in a way almost in her own way that I aspire to. I would love to have a partner and a baby and kind of raise beautiful children while still maintaining an authentic queer identity to myself, whatever that looks and feels like. And someone who can coach me through these things with that love and that tenderness that I need, because I don't do well with like a tough love mentality. So that's certainly one thing. And taking that therapy work seriously in the sense of, you know, applying those coaching techniques through the week as I'm going through something that's challenging, and using those tools and applying them as if I'm a good student. The second thing is last year I was accepted to be a TED fellow. I gave my first TED main stage talk, which was really cool. It just crossed 1 million views, which I'm very proud of, because it's about combating the lyric misogyny that exists in our industry, and inviting the consumer to consume better music, or music that's at least holistic for them. And with that TED fellowship comes a coach, and that coach, he's been wonderful in moving me past my own procrastination tendencies, moving me past my own self-criticism and keeping the positive vibes alive, as I was sharing in our talk. And then the final thing is the meditation work. Deepak Chopra is Indian. He's done incredible work from India, but now in the States with regards to meditation. I did the Oprah tour at the start of last year, where I was drumming to open up Oprah's 2020 Visions tour. And Oprah and Deepak Chopra work very closely together. So I started getting into his meditation, his guided meditations, and I do those every day. And they have these little nuggets of wisdom that certainly have benefited me. So I think that's probably why this theme of mental health is coming across so strong in our interview today, because that's what I've prioritized in order to make my career even stronger.
So my last question is, like, what's next?
I have so many songs
now?
in the pipeline, Erin, I have so many songs in the pipeline. And I think the work that I'm doing right now is like almost trying to create a syllabus for myself. Like, I'm a good student and I do well with deadlines. And when there's no accountability, it's hard. I say that, but there is accountability, because I signed last year. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I signed to Sony Masterworks last year, which is really exciting. And so of course there's a healthy amount of, accountability when you have to give a project to a label. But they're also really excited to have me. So they're very patient with me. And maybe I need a bit more of an ass kicking in terms of getting stuff out faster. So that's sort of where I'm at. I'm working on these songs that really mean a lot to me, that I'm really excited about, and aiming to put out a longer body of work this year. That's the culmination of all the music that I've been making these past 2 years.
So outside of the industry part, like, if you were going to say, like, this would be my next level emotionally, mentally, since we're talking about these things, like, where are you aspiring to be in that other half of your existence?
Do you mean, wait, what do you mean?
Well, you were talking about,
that's the only question you've stumped me.
But you're saying, when I ask what's next, I almost feel like, you spoke to the industry and your career side. Like, the next thing
Right.
is a new body of work, right? That you're going to release and share. But so much of our conversation has been sort of like reaching this state or like mental wherewithal. So,
That's
and it seems to be this balance that you're always like, the industry, one hand holds the other in terms of your career and like your mental well-being. So if that's the next step on the industry side, like, what's the next step for you on your interpersonal well-being?
I have no idea. What a crazy question. Like, when you say that, I'm like instantly stumped. I'm like, I guess I think it's probably good that I'm stumped, because luckily, if there was a next step with mental health, I would already be doing the very thing that we're talking about not doing, which is like being on the hamster wheel of achievement. So I think maybe the good thing is that I feel a lot more present in that work, instead of hoping to be a certain way in the future. But I think I would imagine the answer would be just to be less wounded by things in the future that at one point held me back, to feel this enormous sense of liberation of like, wow, I didn't think I'd ever change. I always thought I'd be sensitive to these types of things, and I'm no longer harmed by those things. I can exist in those spaces with no fear. Everyone who's watching this, we just got to work on being fearless.
I 100% relate to that. I've been thinking a lot about this myself and how it relates to how I moved through the industry. And, especially being a female in my line, there's the scarcity mentality that's been really hard to break out of as I navigate my way through my career. And, that idea of another person who looks like me having an opportunity, 5 years ago, I would have reacted. I would have been wounded by that, because
right.
The idea is that if that person has that opportunity, then that means that I'm suffering in some sense, but it's not true, so that's exactly where I'm kind of going with my own next evolution, is seeing that, and then, like you said, just being filled with some gratitude and light when that occurs. And I think that it's something we can kind of all relate to, who are maybe taking a look at this, is, how do we ascend to that to that.
I think that's it. And I honestly, the better our mental health is, the better the music is, the better the message is, the better we're able to move through the world without things being difficult. Like, I really believe that. Something they talk a lot about in meditation work is like addressing the problem, not from the level, like addressing the solution, not from the level of the problem. And for months, I really didn't understand this concept. But basically, the idea is if you're already in the difficulty of the problem, you're a bit roadblocked. It's very difficult to see the solution. But if you are calm, if you're disconnected from the issue, if you're zen in other areas, and you are then trying to solve a problem from that higher mental space, it's so much easier. In fact, the problem more often than not just goes away. So that's really the work that I've been channeling, as you can tell.
I love this. Well, I think that's a fantastic punctuation mark on our conversation here. And I just want to say thank you again so much for being here with us at Women in Music, and good luck with everything that comes. We'll be listening and keeping our ear to the ground for this next record that's going to come out.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you all. For everyone who's watching, like if there's any other questions or anything that I can help get the dialogue continuing, Madam Gandhi on Instagram. I check all the DMs, Madam Gandhi at Gmail. I'm an open book, especially for this community, which is so important to me and that has held me for so many years. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin and Kieran and Amy and everyone who made it possible for Madame Gandhi to give that talk. It was just so inspirational and brought together like all of our themes from day one with like allyship and activism, and today with the creators and women in music tech. And even tomorrow we're talking about artist teams a lot. So just incredibly inspiring. Moira's here, our VP, to say farewell.
Yes, that was incredible.
Right?
Oh my gosh. I like wanted to be able to rewind and take notes because so much of it was so incredibly valuable, especially just about understanding, the sort of root of feelings and being able to act with kindness once those feelings are healed. It's just like we've all been through so many things in our lives that we can apply that to. It's crazy.
So beautifully said. Well, thank you so much, everyone, again, for being with us today. Thank you to Sweetwater and Bonsai and ASCAP and BMI for sponsorship, and to our incredible, incredible speakers. I was so blown away by some panels today that I didn't even expect to be like so in tune with all of the other themes we've been talking about across the board. So thank you to everyone, and we hope you'll join us tomorrow for Artist Teams and Services. It's going to be a big one. We have a ton of people registered, and it should be great.
Yes, and I'm just
chats and everything.
Looking at the comments here, and a lot of people are asking if we're going to be releasing this content afterwards. I think obviously a lot of people were, like myself, were very moved by that last fireside chat. Do we have plans to release?
Yeah, we're gonna when we haven't gotten to the launch yet, but WIM members are going to soon have a kind of an internal hub. So we're going to have all of our archive content. So it kind of depends on which content we have released for, but I think that we are going to try to make plans to re-air this talk because we just had so many people texting and messaging about how incredibly powerful that was. And certain people in our other chapters in different time zones around the world weren't probably able to make it. So certainly hope to get that out to everyone soon.
Amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. And we'll see you tomorrow, another day.
See you tomorrow. So exciting.
Thanks, everyone.